every Wednesday at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. Thank you for coming through. I'm excited about our show today as I go and get set up. Hopefully it'll be a good vibe for y'all and all that good stuff. All right. I'm an entrepreneurial coach. My main thing is helping you as a side hustler, a solopreneur, or if I can get my words out of my mouth, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. Rainworth TV is every Wednesday at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. And you can also check out some of the bonus episodes and things during the week, whether it's the shorts, which are 60 seconds or less, or even some of the planned and organized episodes, which are more edited and not live. You can catch a whole bunch of them. We're on episode 380, I think, today. So there's plenty of episodes for you guys to dive into. If this is your vibe, be sure and subscribe. You can subscribe for free. Join the 18,000 plus of y'all that have come through and joined over the last 3 years that the show has been happening. You can click the link below or just go to bringyourworth.tv. If you're watching on Amazon or any other platforms, you can just hit the follow button or what have you, and you'll get the regular updates when new stuff comes out. And my latest book, The Complete Bring Your Worth Collection. It is, as it says, the complete Bring Your Worth collection. So every Bring Your Worth book is in this one. And it's actually two of these books are compilations. So it's actually like, I don't know, 8 or 9 books in here. So it's a really good value. It's been quite a journey over the past 8 years. The first Bring Your Worth book, which was actually called The Bite Size Entrepreneur, y'all made it a bestseller. And it was shortly after my second son was born. He just turned 8. So it's been quite a journey. I wanted to really set up something to give you guys some value, give you guys some love. And there's so many of y'all that come in recently as the show's gotten more popular, but there's a lot of books that came out, a lot of things I was doing before the Bring Your Worth show began 3.5 years ago. So I want to give a nice compilation and breakdown for you guys. Thank you for supporting me along the journey. It's kind of a gift to you. Also, you'll see in the link, there's a YouTube link to it right there. You actually will see it below as well, not just in the little Chiron, it's a fancy term for it, little bar down here. You also will see it in the links. I'm actually made the complete audiobook of the complete Bring Your Worth collection available for free at bringyourworth.tv. It's about 8 hours. I know a lot of y'all that I coach are overseas, or you're traveling, or you're bi-coastal. Shout out to y'all on your travels. And so sometimes it's hard to like have a 500-page book, or you know what I mean, or even to get Audible or whatever you use for your audio platform. I want to make sure that was accessible to everybody. If this is something that other people in your life would appreciate. And I coach non-traditional entrepreneurs. So sometimes folks that have less resources, whether it's time or money or attention span, because there's so much stuff going on. I get it. I got 2 little kids, so I get it. Then feel free to forward that over to them. And that's a way that they can get this information and make their impact on the world. And lastly, I'm part of a social media platform called Moxie. It talks about politics, not as far as being partisan, but about literally what's happening, what rules and laws are being passed. And my specific angle is how it's impacting, again, the non-traditional entrepreneurs, the side hustlers, the solopreneurs, the folks with older parents that they're taking care of at home, the folks like myself who have little kids taking care of at home, folks that are part of marginalized communities. I fit into all those. And so with all those different things happening, what kind of laws or legislation is actually going to be impacting folks like that, like ourselves? And so I talk about that regularly. I haven't done a whole lot over the past week or two, but there is going to be a lot more content coming because we have a presidential election. Can't even get it out of my mouth. We have a presidential election happening in about 5 months now. Not that far. That's here in the United States. And to my brothers and sisters overseas, in a lot of parts of Asia and even in Western Europe, you got your own stuff going on. I don't even have to get into it. So this is a time to have these discussions about politics, and not necessarily about a partisan thing like this party or that party or this other party, but more like how are these decisions going to impact how we make a living and how we can make an impact on the world. So be sure and check it out. And if you happen to miss last week's live show, it was about how to calm down. You see, I'm a little bit more chill today. I took my own advice, so I actually was able to take a little bit of a break over the weekend, which was nice. Now this coffee that I'm drinking, shout out to Saigon Coffee, and all this stuff has got me super mellow today. So this is going to be a mellow show. It's actually the after effects of the wonderful show that we did last week about calming down. And my kids are out of school. A lot of folks in America are slowly starting to wind down, and they'll be graduating soon. Shout out to all y'all, as well as the guardians that have helped you get there, as far as parents, grandparents, foster parents, all y'all. Shout out to y'all. Being a parent, it's a tough job. And being a kid is also a tough job too, particularly if you're trying to graduate. So cheers to y'all that are graduating. As we kind of go into this next phase, at least here in America, summer becomes more of a chill time. And so I was really happy of the timing of doing the calm down episode. If you happen to miss it, links right there. It's all available. It's about a 45-minute episode. And I give all these tips and products, but more importantly, strategies to help you stay a little bit calm as things get a little bit hectic. So really important, health is wealth, as they say. And then, oh, that's actually not today's show. I think that's an error. You just get the beginning part. We already did Accepting Your Shadow a while ago. Really important episode. Some of y'all chimed into, which I appreciate. The real thing, what you can see right there, is simple ways to be consistent. This mistake is really important. This was not planned, but it's actually what I'm going to get into. Because sometimes we lose our consistency because we're trying to be perfect. And instead, the important thing is to show up. So today, we're going to show up despite the error. So being consistent is important for a few different reasons. So we're going to define consistency. We're going to talk about why we aren't consistent. And then, of course, ways that we can become more consistent. And consistency, to me, equates trust. You're trusted to be there, or I'm trusted to be there in a certain way. And sometimes we get things a little bit confused and we get into our brains too much. And sometimes consistency is a lot easier than we make it out to be. If you have any questions or thoughts on the topic, be sure and jump in. And, I'd love to get your feedback. If you have questions as far as consistency, if there's something that you're struggling with, the lines are open. All right. So the first question, and let me go and get the title over there. So the first question, and I think it's worth addressing, is what does consistency mean? What does it mean? We talk about, you should be consistent. If you're not a business coach, but like a sports coach, and it's like, okay, well, let's be consistent on in the arena, on the floor, whatever the sport might be. As a parent, as a guardian, you're raising some kids. You're like, okay, well, you want to be consistent in this, that, and the third. But we often don't take the time to actually say, like, what exactly is consistency? It helps when you have kids or young ones around, because they're going to ask you, okay, what does that mean? For me, consistency simply means showing up as you promise. Consistency to me is showing up as you promise. You planned on showing up a certain way, you're going to go ahead and show up that certain way. Now, that might sound super simple, and it is simple. I think we get a little bit confused because we make it more complicated than it is, and we actually don't realize how much control or power we have over how we're consistent. When I started the show, again, 3.5 years ago, it was December of 2020. And when I started this show, sorry, it's 2020? Yeah, the 2020. It's been quite a few years, so forgive me, right? You guys might know better than me. December of 2020, I started the show. And when I first started the show, it was 5 episodes a week, Monday through Friday. And if you've done any regular content, if you're a content creator like I am, if you have any type of media voice, that number is insane, especially for something that wasn't monetized yet. I didn't have sponsors. And I was actually putting money into it instead of actually getting money out of it, as to what's starting to happen today. About 3 or 4 weeks into it, I was really enjoying the process. All the episodes are online, so you're welcome to watch them at bringyourworth.tv after this discussion is done. After I did all that, I'd say I was in week 3. And I woke up one morning, got my kids settled and all that, because they were sheltering in place and they were still pretty young. So one of them hadn't even started school yet. And I was starting to do an episode, and I was like, am I going to be able to do this for the long haul? As I've talked about in recent episodes, I'm a business coach. I've coached hundreds of people at this point. And one of my favorite questions is, whatever you're doing right now, it's sustainable, or can you see yourself doing it a year from now? I'm recording this right now and you're hanging out with me in May. So May of next year, if I did this particular process, would I be in good health? Would I be happy? Would I be sad? Would I be productive? Like whatever outcome I want, is the system that I'm doing right now making sense for it? And I had that dawning on myself. I was just talking to myself, and I was 3 weeks into the show. I'd already done 15 episodes. So I think it was like that Thursday or Friday. I was about to do my 15th episode. And I was like, I don't think this is going to be sustainable. Not only from my own stamina, but also because, again, my kids are growing, their needs are going to change. Again, we were sheltering in place at the time. So we're doing the virtual schooling, which was a mess here in America. I think I can say that as a blanket statement. Everybody was trying to figure it out. We're in the midst of that. And being excited, I had the stamina to do that. And we'll get into that later on the show. The stamina to be consistent on that level. But I knew in the future that wasn't going to work out. And so it was a tough decision because I was so loving connecting with y'all that often. Every day, it was a nice routine with that. But then I was like, this isn't sustainable. So fairly quickly, I think the following week, I went from five days a week, Monday through Friday. I was doing this exact same show, except it was recorded. And I went to 3 times a week. And you guys, old school guys have been, the veterans have been around for a little while. Remember, this was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I had that for almost 2 years, most of this period of time. And I realized I couldn't be consistent on that level and have a certain quality. And I was afraid I was going to burn myself out. Again, there's 400 episodes or so of this very program, and I'm just doing this on my own. So then I'd say the last 3 or 4 months, I scaled it back to one committed show, this one, live on every Wednesday at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. And then if I do extra shows during the week, it's like a treat for y'all, or I get inspired, or something happens, and I'll go and throw a bonus episode in there, which I love. I'm not promising more than I can actually deliver. As we say here in the States, particularly in the corporate world, you under promise and you over deliver. You under promise and you over deliver. So I think when we hear consistency, we think I have to hit this certain standard. I have to hit it every single time, which there's a whole swath of emotions about that we'll talk about later. But I have to hit this certain standard. I have to hit it at any time, and I can't vary from that. That's actually, I disagree with that. Consistency is saying, I will show up to y'all Wednesdays at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. If I'm not going to show up that time, I'll show a rerun, or I'll give you guys a heads up and give you another episode. That's consistency. I can handle that. That fits my life right now, particularly since I'm doing, as I've talked about on the show recently, I'm doing a lot of work behind the scenes with ghostwriting and other things. I'm working on big projects over here for other folks. Like there's a lot of moving parts right now. And so me doing the show, as I did when I first started the show 3 years ago, doing it 5 days a week is unrealistic. It just, so I can be consistent, but what we often forget is that that consistency is based on the commitments we make. I can make a commitment of being here, hanging out with y'all 1 day a week. 3 years ago, it was 5 days a week. But consistency can be based on what you can deliver. You actually successfully delivering what you said you were. To me, that's what consistency is. It's not some pie in the sky ideal standard. People or organizations that are consistent set the standard consciously, and they're honest about what they say no to. To me, that's consistency. Jump into the comments if you guys have another definition of consistency. But at least for me, I rock with that, and it definitely makes me feel peaceful when I think about that. So if you're feeling overwhelmed with the idea of being consistent, maybe you need to change your standard, and you have control over that. And even if other people expect you to be at a different standard, then that requires you having an honest conversation. But having that honest conversation, I've found, is better than holding yourself to a standard that doesn't fit you anymore, isn't realistic. And when you do that, then you're really not consistent, and you're going to end up letting them down, frankly, anyway. One of my favorite books that talks about this concept is The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. So you can tell it's got more, and I got dog ears. It's got some watermarks, probably courtesy of my kids. That's my guess. But it's a beautiful, beautiful looking book. It weighs a couple pounds. It's well done, and it's really really simple. Rick Rubin, best known as the co-founder of Def Jam, which was one of the first, definitely the first major mainstream all hip hop label. The first hip hop label would probably go to Sugar Hill. Shout out to Sylvia Robinson back around the time I was born. But they weren't just dedicated to hip hop. And in fact, hip hop was barely around when they started. Because, of course, they're known for the Sugar Hill Gang, hence the name of the record label. Def Jam was the first one to take it to that level and become a billion-dollar company. To be clear, there will be no Def Jam without Sugar Hill Records. But Def Jam actually, I believe, was the first one to take it really, really mainstream. And we're talking LL Cool J, Slick Rick, Beastie Boys. It just keeps going. I can go Dana Dane. Like I can keep going down the rabbit hole since I'm a hip hop guy. But if you know your hip hop, you're familiar with his name. But after he left Def Jam, then he started producing on his own, and he went wild. We're going from Anthrax and the Red Hot Chili Peppers to the Dixie Chicks to Beck, I believe, all the way to, more of the modern hip hop, even working with, trying to remember his name, Kanye West on a few of his major albums as of late. And the spectrum is wide. So we're talking about a guy that's been at the forefront of creativity for 40 years. I want to say Def Jam was 1982, 83. So what does that make it? Just over 40 years. So let's say 42 years. And this is his first book. And if you know anything about his work, he tends to be relatively reclusive. And so for him to put it in here, it's great. What I love about this, and yeah, he does practice different meditations, as you can tell, if you know your Buddhism and other things like koans, Koans, like what this represents. But it's almost like the creativity and the idea as a circle. Our main purpose is to be creative and to listen to those beautiful voices, whether you call them muses or inspiration, whatever, take your pick. But our thing is to show up regularly for it. That's our main intention. Shout out to Stephen Pressfield and another wonderful book behind me on my shelf, The War of Art. Similar concept. And so it's filled with little chapters. Trying to find one that's not tore up. It's like you tell I was getting into it. But we're talking about like 1-page chapters, 2-page chapters, very short, talking about how you can show up regularly creatively, not creative, regularly creative. Creative means something else here in America, but regularly creatively. This is important because so many of y'all that I work with, so many of y'all that are watching the channel are trying to create something, not just the artists and musicians and the writers like myself, but you're trying to create something out of nothing. As I said in my book, Bring Your Worth, you're creating something out of nothing. If you're doing that, you are making a creative act. Hence the name of it, a creative act, a way of being. We're all doing the same thing. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sacrificing our time or energy or putting our effort into making the world a different place. Like we wouldn't be doing that. You wouldn't be watching the show. So with that inspiration within you, you have to be consistent to make sure that it continues to flow. He talks about consistency in there. It's a really good book to kind of go ahead and sit with and play with. An episode from probably about a year and a half ago on the Bring Your Worth show is the best way to reach your goals, a step-by-step guide. It sounds intimidating, but the episode, I rewatched the episode recently because I think it's about 100 episodes ago, and it's only like 20 minutes long, but it's 3 different steps based on three different episodes from earlier in the show that talk about goal setting and being realistic with it, which again touches on what we talked about today, and finding a way to be consistent. Because if you're going to reach certain goals, you're not going to say, well, hopefully not. You can't just say, I'm going to be a billionaire, or I'm going to be a best-selling author, or whatever that big goal is. I'm going to be the best parent in the world, however you want to frame it. You can't just do that. It actually requires milestones. All right, so if I'm going to be the best parent possible, then that means that I need to know myself better, because how I treat my kids is often reflective of my own level of emotional intelligence and my own, if you want to get psychological for a second, my own level of self-regulation and how I'm able to organize and not control, but understand my emotions. And that's going to affect all my relationships, particularly with my kids. Okay, well, then it starts with that. It's like, well, how do I learn about myself more? Okay, well, let's take a step back. Well, how can I do that? And then you keep going backwards and backwards. So, really, if you're going to go ahead and go to the next level, then of anything, then you need to do the goal setting. And so, even what we're talking about as far as you being more consistent or me being more consistent, we have to go a little bit deeper and find out why that consistency isn't happening in the first place. And that requires these different milestones. So even though goal setting might sound a little bit weird when it comes to consistency, to me, they're one and the same. And if you know that like that, then it makes it hard. And exactly. Consistency and being brave enough to pivot when needing to adjust your commitment. Exactly. Thank you. And that's a lot right along the lines of what I just said. So it's like, you know that it's too much. And it's a question of, or even if you think it might be too much, you ask yourself, can I keep this up? And the answer should not be an automatic yes. It should be, I can keep it up for a little while. Maybe that's your consistency. Maybe you do a show like mine or a project that's in your realm. And you say, I can do work on this project for 3 months. And then the project is done. Wherever it's at, I'm going to ship it. I could say, hey, as soon as I hit episode 400 later on this summer, then this show is done. Thank you. And that's fine too, because I showed up consistently based on who I am and what I have available at the time. But it requires that kind of honesty. And thank you for the comment. And so with the goals, that's part of the energy to say, all right, what am I available to do right now? What am I capable of? That's really important. And then a recent episode, actually, an episode that came out again, also around a year ago, but I highlighted recently on the show, is Brene Brown on how to slow down your business without losing it. And I talked about this, I want to say a couple of episodes ago. It might have been the slowdown episode from last week. So the link is right below. I just mentioned the episode, but the episode that ran a week ago, not a year ago, a week ago, where Brene Brown realized she was burning out. And then she was like, I need to shut things down for the rest of the summer. And so the preparation she went into doing that, but also the reason why I know she was burning out and that I know that she took a break was because she told us. And she had as a beautiful, social media post. I think she had some newsletters too that came out and said, hey, I'm going to take a break because I'm done. I'm juggling 2, 3 different podcasts. I have a new book that just came out. I think Atlas of the Heart that just came out, which is her latest book. All that stuff. She's like, I need a break. I'm going to lose myself in this. So she took a break. And, similar to the comment, it's like, if you know that you need to pivot, then one of the best things you can do is actually be honest about that. But to be honest about that, you have to be honest with yourself. Because how can you communicate that you're pivoting or that you're too much or that you're overwhelmed to somebody else if you're not honest and have a clear line of communication with yourself to do so? Big food for thought there. Again, thanks for the comment. All right. So today we're talking about, what are we talking about? My technology is like, hey, we're not moving that fast. We're talking about not accepting your shadow. That was a couple weeks ago. We're talking about simple ways to be consistent. And part of being consistent, again, is being willing to make mistakes and also being able to reel back your commitments based on you being able to show up consistently for them. Sometimes it's too much, and we have to be willing to admit that to ourselves before we can actually support that. At the end of the day, all we're talking about is relationships, because when it comes to consistency, you can be consistent for yourself, but where really the rubber meets the road is making commitments to other people, because they're ideally going to hold you to it. So how can you hold yourself to that too? That leads to the next question. Why aren't we consistent? It's like, I want to be consistent. I want to show up for people. I want to show up for myself. I want to hit the gym every day. I want to go ahead and be the best partner possible. I want to go ahead and get this book done, whatever it is. It kind of doesn't matter, whatever that thing is for you. And it might be like, yeah, and I don't, for some reason, I'm really motivated and suddenly I'm not. Now, there's psychological things to it. There's different ways that our brains work, right? So there's no blanket thing where I can say, this is how you stay motivated. If someone's saying this is the ultimate key to motivation, it works for everybody, then don't believe them, because people are motivated in different ways. People are motivated by different things. What motivates you isn't going to motivate me, and vice versa. So I think it's important to get it out of the idea of motivation and more like, what is the block that's preventing you from being a little bit more consistent in these things that, if you have a painful feeling around it, you must really want to do them. And I found that there's two major ways that we two major reasons why we aren't consistent. The first one, and I kind of implied this early on in our conversation, is that we take on too much, and we say we're going to do this, and it's this big ideal pie in the sky. Um, there's a scientific term for it that I used to hear a lot when I was younger, and I'm not going to quite get it right, but basically saying, in ideal circumstances, this is what's possible. If you frame it like that, and you're adulting like I am, then you can quickly realize that whatever goal you're going after and how you're trying to be consistent might not work. Because if you're an adult, even if you're a kid, your circumstances are rarely going to be ideal. Now, if you're in a quote unquote good environment and you have a certain, you're in a certain bubble because you're a kid and you got a safe, emotionally safe, physically safe household and all that stuff, then you're going to be, uncomfortable sometimes, but you're gonna have way more elbow room, and chances are you're going to be in that ideal environment more. But if you have people dependent on you, if you are an adult, if you have to make money for a living, if you have to take care of your housing and your health insurance on stuff, there's way too many dynamics to be in that ideal situation all the time. I have a friend that has way more kids than I do. I want to say they have 5, maybe 6 kids now, which, is already making me get more gray hair here just thinking about that. Blessings to the kids that I have. And this wonderful thing that they said a while ago was that they don't wait for the perfect day, because let's just say with 6 kids, odds are very strong that one of the kids was going to be having a bad day or a bad moment in any day of the week. And the odds are a little bit less, but chances are that 2 of the kids are going to be having a bad day. So odds are 2 out of 6, 1 out of 3. And me having kids, those things are probably related because one probably did something to the other or vice versa. I digress. Again, if you're a parent, you understand what I'm trying to say. And so the thing is that how can I have an amazing day or create these things that have the elasticity, the pivoting, as the comment said earlier, the pivoting, the elasticity, the flexibility, just when, it's not being negative, when something doesn't go as planned. It doesn't have to be something that's bad, just something doesn't go as planned. As we go into adulthood and further into adulthood, I'm middle-aged now, the stuff we don't have on our control actually expands, probably because there's more that a responsibility we have and more people that are dependent of us until we reach older age. With that in mind, whatever you consider to be consistent about, whatever your goal is, I'm going to show up and do this thing every day. Well, that's under ideal circumstances. When a circumstance that you don't foresee happens, that is not ideal, and it could be good or bad, whatever. There's plenty of lottery winners that are miserable. So I'm not trying to put good or bad on it. It's just something that you were not expected that changes the circumstance. Once that changes, are you going to be flexible enough to rock or move to that direction that's better? With the higher goals or with the taking on too much, however you want to frame it, some of that comes from not wanting to let other people down. And that's where the communication part comes in, because sometimes you're trying to be consistent on this level, and then you talk to, your partner or your business wise, romantically or whatever, or you talk to your boss, and you're up here and you're burning yourself trying to get up here, and then you talk to them, and then in reality, you could be here and it'll be fine. Or, which has happened to me multiple times, I'm thinking whatever it is I'm being consistent about, it's high priority. And then I talk to whomever it is or the organization, and it's not even a priority for them. But this other thing over here is a priority. And they'd rather I try to be consistent about that than this thing over here that I've ballooned well beyond what they actually needed. And frankly, what my resources are. And so Once you get into the flow of that, you realize where you might be taking on too much. And of course, that requires sometimes having uncomfortable conversations when the expectations of you are higher than what you're actually able to deliver consistently. The good part about it, there you go. Yeah, you have to make sure that those expectations meet. Thank you. And so the hard part about it, or the important part, is to have that self honesty to know when you're in over your head. So that first part, when we're not consistent, it often can be because we're taking on too much. We're doing too much. Like we're pushing it because we want to, as I say, people please somebody else, or we haven't had that conversation and actually realize that we actually didn't have to perform at this level beyond our particular resources. The second thing, which I had mentioned, is that we often do not think long term about it. And some of that happens because we're not thinking long term, and it's just we didn't think about the next week or the next month. A lot of the material that I do, even the business coaching that I do, is geared towards that. It's kind of helping you, even grabbing my books, whatever. It's helping you ideally push out a little bit further and say, "Oh yeah, yeah, this is I can go further than this. There's more insight here than just today, and I don't have to hustle, or I shouldn't hustle as hard this moment because I'm going to be hustling every day until I decide to get into another business or until I decide that this project is done." That's a long time. And so once you put it like that, it's like maybe it is more of a marathon than a sprint. Maybe I need to calm down a little bit. And that will naturally lower your expectations as far as what you can be consistent with, which is really important. And the other thing, as I mentioned earlier, is that you have to think about whatever you're doing, how is it going to impact you 3 months from now, a year from now, even 5 years from now? I started this show 3.5 years ago. There's certain decisions, as I mentioned at the top of the show, there's certain decisions that impacted my health, my well-being, my connection to my family, my ability to do other work. I had written 3 books during the period of time in the past 3.5 years since I've had the show. So I'm doing these other things. I'm working with clients such as yourself and all that. If I had said I'm going to be consistent, again, doing 5 episodes a week, yeah, I would have like 2,000 episodes by now. But at what state would I be in? Maybe those books wouldn't have happened. Maybe I wouldn't be as available for you as a business coach one on one. Maybe some of the keynotes and other things that I was able to make a bigger impact with, maybe they never want to happen. So the key thing is to figure out, number one, if we're taking on too much and why. It's important to know the why for that one. It could be people pleasing. It could be because we don't want to admit that we're overwhelmed, right? Whatever the reason, you kind of have to get to the bottom of it to be in a better place. The second part is that we often aren't consistent because we're not thinking long term, and we're thinking just in the next week, or we get really excited and we're like, yeah, we're going to go and do this every single day, as I did when I began this show 3.5 years ago. And thankfully, I calmed myself down. And as I talked to mentors and other folks later, they were like, yeah, that's a great idea. Maybe you can do the episodes a couple times a week or once a week. There's some folks I know that do a podcast episode, shout out to y'all, like once a month. But to have the quality that they want to have, and if it's their lifestyle, they do once a month. And they do really good work. So, I mean, it works for them. As long as it works for the people that you're trying to support, then that's all that matters. If you want more insight, a really good place to start is The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. So shout out to Simon. The short version of it is that there are finite games and infinite games. A finite game would be like American football. There's 4 quarters. There's a certain amount of points. But particularly once we get to the end of the quarter, then I'm sorry, once we get to the end of the 4 quarters, the last quarter, then whoever has the most points wins. If no one has if they're equal, as far as there's a tie, then they go into overtime, double overtime, until someone finally has one team has finally more points. That's a finite game. And everybody, gets about the stands, takes their hot dogs and goes home. And then the next football game's the next week, but it's a totally different matchup, right? Infinite games are games that are forever. being married is an infinite game until you're not married anymore, because you can win an argument. Trust me, I've been on both sides of that. You can win an argument, but then you're still sleeping next to that person, and you're still making breakfast or having breakfast made with that person next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. You can see why I'm talking about this in our consistency episode, because like you can go ahead and, as the saying goes, like, yeah, they won the battle, but they're about to lose the war. And so, even to get sharper with that point, there's certain games where there are no winners. Your job is to just coexist. Same thing with, I've launched two startups and I'm selling the second one. For the second startup, I had two other co-founders. Our job wasn't to be the better co-founder or the best to other people. Our job was to, frankly, survive having one of the most popular apps at the time, Cuddler, almost 10 years ago. Our job was to survive and make sure that the app, and more importantly, the community, we had about 250,000 users, those users thrived. Our job wasn't against each other. That's an infinite game until we sold the app. We sold the business, but it was an infinite game until that. He breaks that down way more eloquently than I can, and it's a fantastic book. It's actually inspired by a previous book by a scientist called Finite Games and Infinite Games, or it might be Infinite Games and Finite Games. I believe it's linked somewhere in there, even if you go to the page for the Infinite Game. I think he gives a shout out and talks about the original book. Worth checking out the original book too, but of course doesn't necessarily have the modern Simon Sinek, flair when it comes to that. But definitely go ahead and check out both books. Another book that will work really well in understanding this, similar book called The Long Game by Dorie Clark. Shout out to Dorie. She actually interviewed me for her Newsweek show a couple years ago. You can actually check it out for free at bringyourworth.tv. But I've known Dorie for a little while. Have always admired her work. Hope you're doing wonderful, Dorie. Her book is fantastic. And it talks about less about the business strategic part of that infinite game, which is more Simon's area. And she addresses that, but I found it's more interesting on the relationship part of it. Not intimate relationships, but just literally your relationship with your customer, how you treat them, how you're building up trust over time. You'll notice there's certain words I keep using during this episode about consistency, and it's trust, it's relationships, it's commitment. All those different things play into consistency. Consistency builds trust. I think that's the main argument with Dorie's book. Consistency builds trust. And on trust, all these other things can be built. Your business can, and I would argue should be built on that. Your livelihood, as far as bringing money in, is built on that. Your recurring customers, your 1,000 true fans, as Kevin Kelly would say. I have a video on that too if you want to go to bringyourworth.tv. As Kevin Kelly would say, the 1,000 true fans, those folks that will support you no matter what and want to contribute to your work. That all comes from consistency. That's what this book is about. Again, fantastic book. Be sure and check it out. If you want to go a little bit deeper as far as why you might not be consistent with things and where those blocks are, be sure and check out a recent episode, How to Know Yourself More, a beginner's guide. And it's a few major concepts, including that recent live about your shadow, as far as you getting the tools you need to know yourself better. And as many folks have said, psychologists, sociologists, even armchair folks like myself, if you don't know yourself, then you don't know how you're going to show up. If you don't know how you're going to show up, then it's really hard to build trust because other folks don't know which one of you is going to appear. And that's real talk. Hell, you might not even know which one of you is going to appear. Because once we're out of those ideal situations or things get weird or wacky or you get uncomfortable, then stuff might come up. And suddenly you can't be consistent because you're busy dealing with your own baggage or drama. That's not a judgment against you. We all have it. Literally all of us have that. The question is, how are you going to process that? You see my shirt, get you a therapist, whatever works for you. You go ahead and you process that. And then you're able to go and show for people more and be consistent, which I think is so important. Thank you. Right. And it's so important to the process, no pun intended with the ideal process. but we all have to go through our process. One last recommendation when it comes to being more consistent is Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek's, if I can say this right, Simon Sinek's Guaranteed Secret to Success Most of Us Won't Do. And it was based on an Inc. magazine column I had a few years ago. Shout out to Inc. magazine. And talking about consistency. And he has a killer quote in there. It was enough for me to do a 10-minute video about. I'm not even going to spoil the quote. Check out the video. It's one of my favorites. And I think you guys might enjoy that. So again, you're watching the Bring Your Worst show. I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown. I'm here at your service as a side hustler, solopreneur, or otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. Happy to support. Bring Your show is every Wednesday at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. You can subscribe for free. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, if you're not showing up regularly and there's stuff that comes up, then suddenly you might not be consistent anymore. And that's a rough place to be. I know all of us want to be consistent, so I want to go and help on that journey. All right, as we wrap up, the last question: how do I create consistency? I think that's really important to figure that out. And this actually taps on a lot of the things that we've talked about. Number one, it's like we have to be honest with ourselves. Because if we're not honest with ourselves, how can we be honest with other people? And then changing the expectations and perimeters, not only for other people as far as having those conversations, but also for ourselves. And we might see ourselves as being able to smash it, kill it, hustle 110%, whatever, every single day. We're not built like that. No one is built like that. Even the people that might be bouncing around your head that say they crush it every day, everyone has bad days. And if you listen carefully, they'll actually imply that, that sometimes they don't crush it all the time. If we're not honest with ourselves, then it's really hard to set up what that expectation of consistency is and that actually show it up. I don't know what I'm saying. Show it up for other people. I must need some more coffee. So let me stop the tongue tie. One of my favorite books about this is The Martha Rules. And if you've been a long time watcher of the program or have read my books, you know that I love this book. This book premise is really simple. Martha Stewart, and this book is about 20 years old. Martha Stewart, in her media dominance, again, back around the turn of the century, she seemed to be everywhere at once. She would create something and then she'd be on Sirius Radio, which was really popping at the time. It was new. She'd be on Sirius satellite radio, and then she'd have our magazine that would come out. I think it was every week. Like, it was insane. And of course, like, she had a team and a staff, but the secret to it is that she would find one particular topic, or a team would find one particular topic, and they'd find 500 ways to express that topic. So it could be a recipe in the magazine for apples. Let's say it's fall and it's for apples. And then it could be an interview on Sirius XM on a radio station, interviewing the apple farmers up in Vermont and what they expect this apple season. And then it could be a profile on her TV show. I think she had multiple at the time. On her TV show, a profile of folks that brew, if they call it brew, apple cider, and all the newest apple ciders that are really cool for the millennials now. There you go. But it's one concept, and you're putting it in different ways. The reason why I'm bringing up this book is that reflects consistency. So in what ways can you create this one thing, or build this one thing, or show up this one way, and then get as much bang as for your buck as possible, so that you actually are able to be consistent without burning yourself out? Fantastic book. If you're struggling with burnout and you're like, I don't know how I can continue to be consistent, this is a fantastic book to start with. And my last recommendation is a recent episode I did on music business secrets. You might be like, Damon, why are you talking about music business? What are you talking about? And the episode just premiered a couple Sundays ago. It's important because it breaks down the habits of Prince, of Michael Jackson, of Jay-Z, Beyonce, I think a couple other folks. It's about an hour and a half long episode breaking down their particular habits and approaches that allowed them to be as prolific as they were while they're alive, or even, frankly, all the work that's coming out after they passed away. That's how prolific they were. It's not just about productivity and I'm going to get all these things done, but more about how they made decisions that fit their particular lifestyle and how you can make those decisions based on your particular lifestyle. So I really enjoyed the episode, and it's been a lot of support for the episode too. So I'm glad you guys are appreciating it as well. And that, my friend, is how you ideally become a little bit more consistent. As I talked about in today's newsletter, consistency isn't just I'm going to show up every day when I can get things perfect or right. Just like today, like I'm a walking example of that, where there's a mistake in this title right here, but I still showed up. And when I saw the mistake after we were already live, I didn't like suddenly turn off the camera and then say, cancel the show. I'm out. Let me go drink my coffee. No, it's like, this is consistency. I promised I was going to be here for y'all. So I'm here. Mistakes or not. And sometimes, again, our standard is so high. We're so hard on ourselves that sometimes we just don't show up because it's not this perfect thing. So here's to not being perfect. Until next time, remember, you can always bring your worth, and you can always build from now. Take care of yourselves and others.